Assassin's Creed Valhalla was a review due out about 4 months ago. Well, I'm here now. In this review, we've got an intro, which we've already covered, who I am, the first 4 hours of gameplay, the next 40 hours of gameplay, some overall thoughts along with a quick summary. As I'm sure you can see though, this is going to be a long one. So, let's get into it. So, who am I? Or more to the point, who am I to the Assassin's Creed franchise? I'm a pretty big Assassin's fan. I've been playing since the first game and I've finished every mainline series to at or near 100% synchronization at least once. Most of them multiple times. I love the lore, I love the story, I love the characters, and most importantly, I love playing these games. Assassin's Creed Odyssey, the game Valhalla is following up, was actually the first game since Skyrim to take the title of my favorite game of all time. Although that title has now been stolen by Mass Effect Legendary Edition, get subscribed, review coming soon. Not only did I love, and still love, Assassin's Creed Odyssey, but it also currently holds my title for the best DLC of all time with The Fate of Atlantis. So, long story short, I'm a pretty big Assassin's Creed fan, and this game has some unfairly large boots to fill. Guess we better get started. The first 4 hours. This tutorial is long, but not in a Pokemon mountain of text type of way. More like, here's a slice of skippable feature film to start you off on your journey. The game is big. Not just in the story takes you a long time to finish, I probably could have finished the opening tutorial in about an hour, maybe 30 minutes if I was really fast, which for the record I think is a good base for a tutorial. But there was so many optional extras to complete that I could also have gotten 10 or maybe even 20 hours in just trying to fill out the map and complete everything the game offered me, just in that tutorial. What's even better is that I wanted to. In my last review, I talked about how in Star Wars The Force Unleashed, finding all the collectibles and extra content really felt like a chore. In this game, it's a joy. I could have spent hours hunting for resources, checking caves, hell, just flying around as a frickin' raven. In fact, the only reason I didn't stay to complete everything was that I knew I had a video to make and only a limited amount of time to finish the game in. Obviously, this took a little longer than planned anyway. That said, not everything is perfect. From early on, the combat felt clunky. Not from a performance standpoint, even my 4-year-old graphics card had this thing running smooth, but from a controller perspective. I admit I've been out of the console game for a while, 8 years actually. I've mostly transitioned to mouse and keyboard, which was flawless to play with by the way, but playing on the Xbox controller, the attack button being right above the trigger was really odd. Like, why isn't it the trigger? What's worse was attack and assassinate being the same button. This caused me a lot of issues. Sometimes even when the assassinate prompt was up, the character would attack instead, destroying my stealth attempt and needlessly making the game harder. In addition, some of the animations were a little odd. Have a look at this necklace for instance. And the mini games really just aren't my thing, though we'll come back to those later. But when all said and done, these are small issues. As I alluded to above, I loved the opening hours of this game. Despite the fact that it had a lot to live up to and more pressure than any game should have in a fair review, 4 hours in, it was going great. So, only another, how long to go? The next 40 hours. Let's cut to the chase. 40 hours is not enough time to experience this game. Yeah, don't tell me there's probably a speedrunner who's finished it in 4 or less, that is not my point. This game is huge. Raiding, questing, hunting, exploring, finding music, crafting, fishing, just watching the gorgeously designed landscape go by in cinematic mode, this stupid rune game, all of it. This game has so much to offer and 40 hours was just not enough time for me to try it all. So for today, this section is more like the next 100 hours. Let's start with the main quest. Sorry, Crash, just give me a second. As is the standard for the series now, the main quest line sees you meet up with some historical figures, in this case the Sons of Ragnar and some of the kings of England, and take over an area to become your little kingdom. The characters I met felt true to their beliefs and their time, based off what little I know of them anyway. I really enjoyed all the interactions I got with these characters. They all differentiated themselves, they had interesting and optional subplots, some in quests, some hidden away in scrolls, and I really enjoyed the voice acting behind them, even if the animation was still a little bit clunky. Additionally, I felt the brutal gameplay really played into the emotional intensity of the story and the drive of these characters. For instance, and this next part is a spoiler, so if you plan on playing the story yourself, skip forward about 20 seconds. The brutal pummeling that I gave Eyeball really added to the climax of his betrayal, but also I felt stayed grounded in the myths and legends that we've come to know of the brutal lifestyle of these Vikings, and more importantly, it stayed so true to the character and the experience I had with them through the game. That's the end of the spoiler, by the way, you can safely resume. The TLDR of the main questline is that I absolutely loved it. It was deep, twisted, and incredibly acted. I mean, just have a look at some of these scenes. And again, there's a spoiler, so you can skip about 30 seconds if you don't want that.
Children. They bewilder you. They can cause you so much worry. fill you with joy, even stop your heart. And if you're lucky, they replace you.
It's worth keeping. We fight wars to save those we love and pay in blood for what we win. This book, this is your good sister's battlefield, her kingdom.
All in all, there were twists that I didn't see coming, and of course a couple that I did, all of which were absolutely fantastic. Moving on to area-based quests. Each area of the map splits off into its own independent quest section. These typically then spawn a few more sub-quests. It's not an overwhelming amount, though if you really wanted to explore a region to its fullest, it'll definitely take you a few days per area, but that's also entirely optional. If such is your preference, just do the main quest and ignore everything else. You'll probably finish in a couple of hours. Each area's quests sustain themselves, so they still reference the other quests and kingdoms, making them feel individual but still grounded in the reality of the game and important to the overall story it's telling. Most of these end in either gaining an alliance for your settlement or furthering the main quest line, in a number of cases, both. Then we've got secondary quests. Most people in your town also have a quest. Actually, most of them have multiple quests. That said, most towns are also full of people with quests, but for the sake of completing this review, I only did 1 or 2 of those quests per town outside of my own settlement, where I tried to get through most of them. Some are small, like listening to a dispute about someone stealing a horse's tail. Others involve a history of befriending, bandits, castle raiding, and all sorts of exciting adventures. Whilst I didn't have time to complete all these quests in my rush for this review, I actually really enjoyed them. Often I find these quests can be very filler. That is to say, they feel like spaces put in by the developers to extend the runtime of a game. But these didn't. Yes, they probably meet the technical definition of a filler, but they felt authentic. Hell, I even enjoyed the small moment you spent with the local baker as he tells you about his passion for feeding people while you sail in towards the bread market. That's normally the type of quest I'd be sitting here criticizing for stalling time. But it's so well put together and feels authentic, like part of the world and story you're... That happen again? I swear this was stable when I wrote it. Moving on from the quest and characters that we meet, I enjoyed that they didn't power creep Ivor over Cassandra. Don't get me wrong, the power of the old gods is still here, especially as you near the endgame. But Cassandra was the closest descendant we've had to the Isu and the only one in lore to be called a demigod, so it makes sense that she's the strongest. She's somehow able to vanish the bodies that she kills so others cannot find her, the ability to unleash an old weapon's form a godly power and destroy any threat around you, commanding the alpha animals to maul your targets, and most famously of all, she doesn't desynchronize if you kill the wrong target. All that to say, the combat felt like it came into its own in this game, but not at the cost of power creep or making previous assassins feel like preschoolers waving sticks around. Actually, one of the things I grew to really love in this game was how, as you got higher leveled, the difference in levels came not to matter. I may have struggled in combat at the start of the game, but as I climbed my way through the levels of the game hitting about 200, I was able to battle level 3 to 340 enemies, and don't get me wrong, it's hard, but it's not smack your head into a brick wall hard. Those are fights that I won. As you unlock more abilities, it's like the game's combat system is morphing to your own playstyle. I may have struggled at the start, even losing some of the opening battles in the tutorial section, but once I'd unlocked a few selected abilities and got my head around those, the whole game opened up to me. It felt like combat was a unique experience to me, morphing to the way I wanted to play it. And of course, it's not just other people that you have the option to kill. What is gaming doing to me? Hunting, sneaking through the tall grass, edging closer and closer to your target, picking the right tool for the job before finally pouncing and unleashing your Pokeball! That might be the wrong review. Hunting brings a great bit of joy to the game, and what's honestly the best part about it is how optional it is. If you want to spend hours tracking a beast, farming deer for leather, or mining deposits for ore, you can! Alternatively, assassinate a bunch of dudes and loot the fort and just buy all the materials you need. Hunt down the legendary animals of each territory, fight them, outwit them, run from them, bring back their pelts, or just upgrade your starting armor to the same level. There's so much on offer, but if it's not your style, none of it's mandatory. Hell, if you really wanted to struggle, you could probably get through the game with only basic armor. And then there's fishing. I don't like fishing in video games, it's pretty much that simple. But I even found fishing in Valhalla to be fun. Once that is, I realized I didn't actually have to wait for the fishing line and I could just shoot the damn fish with my bow and have Igly the Eagle, Sunan the Raven, collect them for me. And then there's the game's classic, stealthy fort takedowns. Stealth forts felt like they were the right amount of challenging without being too time consuming, or at least they didn't feel like they took too long. The hours of gameplay might suggest otherwise. Although I'll point out here that the game's instability was at its worst during these forts. Not that it crashed anymore, but because you cannot save or make use of the autosave feature while behind enemy lines. So if the game crashed, which it did a lot, you'd have to start the entire fort. Are you serious? I'm halfway through something! Did you have to do that right now? Even war had flexibility. Will you join the ram and batter down the gates? or climb over to break the locks yourself and open them from the inside. Perhaps you'll stand with your fellow soldiers and kill every last enemy, or maybe you'll sprint ahead and wait for the poor soldiers to catch up. I mean, that's their job, you gotta play the hero, right? Is using traditional weapons like the sword and board for you? Maybe running around and finding spears and longswords to yeet into your opponent's face is your preference. You can even find flaming jars of oil and turn your enemies into barbecue chicken, though I'd recommend leaving them to cool first. You can definitely get secondhand burns. Actually, if I'm being honest, that all sounds like a lot of exercise. Why don't I sit on this giant crossbow and just kill everything from here? Whatever you pick, it feels well thought out. No one option is designed with a clear advantage and no option feels left behind. I mean, except for the giant crossbow. At some point, you're gonna have to get off that thing. You've actually got to walk to the checkpoints to progress the gameplay, otherwise... Come on! Really? Of course, the game is not perfect. My main issue with the gameplay was that parkour still feels like it hasn't progressed since Assassin's Creed Brotherhood, a game that came out 12 years ago. Wow, I'm old. I've probably got about 1,000 of these clips that you're seeing right now where the character is not able to go where the game is clearly telling me to go. In fact, the number of times it'd be a quest marker through one of these houses, and I'd just spend 15 to 20 minutes of my life trying to make this mechanic work. The animations also felt clunky, though to be fair, I think most video games are approaching a point where the animations simply don't live up to the visuals. This inevitably makes them feel worse than they are. There was never a time where I didn't know what an animation was meant to be, it just was something that stood out like an eyesore compared to the image on the screen. And as much as it might seem like overkill, I cannot emphasize enough how much this game crashed. Sometimes more than 6 times in an hour. Put it this way, the playtime on my save file was almost 40 hours behind the amount of time I spent playing the game. That's a huge amount of time lost to replaying and reloading something that cost over $100 Australian, and that's simply not good enough. With that in mind, and I'm only getting technical here because I know someone will point out in the comments if I don't, I know that around the time Intel 12th generation launched, it was known to have a problem with this game. There was also a lot of advertising around that release about these issues, and I happen to be rocking a 12th generation Intel i5. However, I am still criticizing this because according to both Intel and Ubisoft, that issue has long been fixed, which means either they're lying about this game's stability on a modern CPU, or everyone is crashing regardless of their CPU choice or something else in the game, and whichever outcome it is, I think it's really not acceptable. I'll also quickly point out, I tried everything that was recommended by Ubisoft's team, from verifying the game files and reinstalling graphics card drivers to even buying a brand new NVMe SSD, doing a fresh install of the game on that, and none of these had any effect on my crashes per hour. Honestly, I just don't think that's good enough. But speaking of good enough, let's touch on the game's ending. In the end, Valhalla was beautiful. I mean, that's really it. I could sum up the entire video with just that. The game was full of story, full of character, and full of just beauty. There was so much build up in this story, and even if the ending didn't wrap it all up, don't worry, there's a post-game. It wrapped it up so well that even without a post-game, I would have been satisfied. The ending to this game genuinely left me smiling. I mean, when's the last time you played a game and just found yourself smiling stupidly at a screen as the credits roll? And just to be clear, when I say the ending, I mean the real ending, not whatever happened in the Matrix. My final thoughts. I'll try to keep this section a bit shorter as I've already made this the longest review I've released. Though not the longest edited video I've done, that would be a Back 4 Blood challenge run which you can find linked in the description, and yes, that's a plug. I loved this game. More than anything I've played this year. Sorry Arceus, in fact I loved it more than most other games I've ever played. It really reminds me of why I love video games and the passion that drew me to start reviewing them in the first place. This game had impossible expectations to meet. Odyssey not only renewed my faith in this series, it's also one of the best games I've ever played. Valhalla not only had to come off the back of that, it also had to justify an unbelievably hefty price tag. But it did. This game may not be perfect. Hell, I spent a few paragraphs in here talking about why it's not. But it is brilliant. And it packs enough that whatever your taste is, as long as it's not multiplayer, you'll find it here. Fishing, hunting, raiding, questing, exploring, fighting, fucking just sitting on your horse or boat while the hours tick by watching how beautiful this game really is. It took my breath away. From the halls of the Raven Clan to the fields of Valhalla, I loved every minute of it. More than that, I feel like this game improved upon the series. Odin appearing and freezing time feels like it finally justifies some old mechanics, like the extended talks you have with your victims before death in the middle of a battleground, or even just talking to yourself. Something that's been really helpful gameplay-wise, but never made much sense from a storytelling perspective. Now, instead of your character constantly reminding themselves why they're meant to be where they are, the player's just talking to Odin about it. Furthermore, this game gives us more backstory, but it didn't tie it down to a main storyline for those who aren't 14 years deep into an Assassin's Creed addiction. I mean, just 14 years of gameplay, that's totally normal. Something that other games could really learn from. Honestly, the worst part about this game was feeling like I had to rush it to play enough to cover this review. I could not get enough of what was on offer, and in terms of getting your money's worth, that's as high a praise as I can give. In summary, did I like this game? Yes. I can honestly say that to date, this has been the best game I've reviewed in 2022. And as much as that's not a long list yet, I suspect this game won't be moving from that spot. This game may have its issues, but I love it. I really do. It's not every day that a game comes along and consumes so much of your mind that even when you put it down, it's still playing in your head, consuming your dreams, and even bringing a smile to your face as memories pop up. It's got so much packed into it that I really can't think of any reason not to. Thank you so much for watching. I know it's been a while since my last video game review. I got a little tied down with my latest series, Gamesplaining, a weekly gaming news video where I tell you about things that happen in the world of gaming, whether you've heard them or not. If you haven't seen it, there's a link in the description. Please check it out, it would mean the world to me. Back to games, I hope to be back on the review train soon with some more videos coming out in the next few months. If you're looking forward to that, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss them. And if it turns out to be another big gap between this and my next review, just remember, nothing is true and everything is permitted.